Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ansible Library. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, something new for me. I recently was tagged as part of a New Year, New Me book tag challenge. The YouTube creator Madeline Reeds tagged me in one of her videos, and it seemed a pretty interesting idea, and it got me thinking a little bit. So I'm giving it a go for me now. I recommend checking out Madeline Reed's. She does a lot of science fiction, horror, young adults, and romance. She just covers a lot of different genres and a lot of different things. Recommend checking her out, and I will try my hand at sort of tagging some other creators that I've been watching and enjoying. I'm not sure if they've done this before or exactly how it works since I'm new to this sort of tag challenge, but I thought it would be a fun sort of different kind of video that to sort of keep the ball rolling. So the first question of this New Year, New Me book tag challenge was fears. What's one book on my reading list that scares me? And for this, I picked Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. And I've heard nothing but praise for this book and nothing but good things about this book. And I feel like it's a book that's right up my alley in the hard science and what it's dealing with and sort of these the rising up of species into these higher forms of intelligence and what that would look like and everything. But the reason it scares me is because I am deathly afraid of spiders. And for those of you who don't know, this book is about a humans are on their way to this planet that was previously terraformed to be occupied by this human race as they come on these generational ships. But when they arrive, they realize that the terraforming process has sort of elevated these spiders of these planets to a higher intelligence. And so it's this culture and race of intelligent spiders. I hear good and bad things that this book is a hard book for people with arachnophobia to get through because it is a very much heavy on spiders and description of spiders and all of that stuff. But then I hear it's also sometimes it's a good thing because it helps people get over their fears. And like I really want to dive into it, but it's just I'm holding back because I don't think I could sit through right at this moment of however many 600 pages about these spiders. And let me know if it's not as bad as I'm building it up in my head, or if it sort of is manageable. But uh, that's why I picked that book as for my fears. Now, question two is patience. What's one book on my 2026 reading goals that I want to get to first? And now I have sort of a shotgun approach to picking the books I read, it seems, in the past. And I would just do a lot of random picks, a lot of random things, sometimes pick stuff that I was genuinely interested and wanted to. But for the most part, I was, going in blind, picking stuff willy nilly to then read. And I found a lot of good stuff that way, and I found some stuff that doesn't sit with me. But so I don't generally plan ahead in that sense. But if there is one book that I really want to get to this year, and I've had the patience to get to it, I guess, would be The Fall of Hyperion by Dan Simmons. And I read Hyperion probably 2 years ago at this point, and I loved it, and I thought it was an amazing book. And like I love the priest tale. Everyone says the priest tale is their favorite, but I also enjoyed the detective story, and I enjoyed the like the archaeologist story, and like moving backwards through time and getting younger and younger. And so I loved just the structure of it, and I loved the characters in it and how it came together. And I was just finished it and was super satisfied and walked away. And I was actively looking for The Fall of Hyperion and the rest of the series for a while. And actually, The Fall of Hyperion was the last one of them I could find. And so that's why I sort of held off so long from reading it. But now that I have it, I feel like I want to get back into it. I want to read sort of the conclusion of that first story and see how it progresses into these other ones. So I think that's going to be my next sort of pick for the year that I'm looking forward to getting to. Question three is growth. What is a book I read last year that pushed me to reflect and grow as a reader? Time Enough of Love by Robert A. Heinlein. Um, I don't have it to hold up and show anymore because it was a book that I DNF'd last year. And when I sort of started reading science fiction, branching out in science fiction more, I was reading a lot of Heinlein. Like Moon is a Harsh Mistress was for a long time was one of my favorite books, and Stranger in a Strange Land was great, and Cat Who Walked Through Walls and Starship Troopers. I thought they were awesome, and he was one of my favorite authors at the time. But it was, I'm understanding now that it was just, I hadn't read a lot of other stuff. And so, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of really great stuff that he's written, but reading Time Enough for Love made me come to terms and reflect on the stuff I had read in the past. And I hadn't read him for such a long time after that sort of first big bout of reading I did of him. And so revisiting him after all these years and after all these other experience with all these other authors, I really didn't like his writing, and I really didn't like the story he was telling in it. Um, and it made me sort of second guess and question all those books I read in the past that I held up to such high regard, and made me sort of want to go back and revisit them now and see how I feel about them now. Um, and yeah, there's been, I've read like Between Planets, I read pretty recently by him, and like a sort of a juvenile, and I thought it was a really great book for a juvenile. And Double Star, another short one of his, I thought was really, really good. So that I'm still finding stuff I like by him, but Time Enough for Love was like my first big, solid novel by him. And it just, it started out so strong with this idea of telling the story of this Lazarus Long character, who, because of his natural longevity um, from selective breeding in the Earth's paths and all these sort of reconstruction and rebuilding of his body, he's the oldest man alive in the universe, and he's been alive for thousands of years. And it's him talking to this sort of corporation and giving his memoirs about his life. And I thought that was a really cool concept and idea. And I was fully on board at first, but then it gets to these weird, incestuous sort of areas, and build it like he building this sort of free love community where, you know, he's, everyone is sleeping with everyone, and the female version of himself that was cloned he's in a relationship with, and like grandchildren, and like it just goes to some really gross, in my opinion, places. And like, I don't shy away from sex in books if it's meaningful to the story and progressive to the plot, and, you know, done in a well way. And this just felt wrong reading it, and it just made me sort of like question everything about Heinlein. And so I couldn't finish it, and it was one of the only books I DNF'd last year. So it made me grow as a reader to realize that all these things I've held in such high regard in the past maybe aren't that great. Maybe I need to go back and visit them. And I know there'll be some by his that I will still love, but it just, this just left me enough of a sour note to just make me question things again. Question 4 is New Path. What author do I plan on reading for the first time this year? And for this question, I decided to pick Louise McMaster Bujold, and specifically the Vorkosigan saga. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But these, I have a large number of these books from this series by this author, and I haven't read a single one of them. And I just kept picking them up because at the time when I decided to start branching out into science fiction, or focusing more on science fiction, not branching out, I was wanting to read all the Hugo winners, and she has a large number of her books in this series are Hugo winners. So I was just picking up all the sort of those ones, and I ended up, I have, I don't know, 8 to 10 of these books now, and I just couldn't bring myself to start reading them, and couldn't bring myself to just sort of diving into this huge sort of series. But I feel like I've held off long enough, and I'm starting to see some of her, you know, more of her reviews popping up, uh, and on booktube. And so I feel like it's a sign for me to, you know, finally sort of rip the band-aid off and dive into it. I hear that her books are great. Um, the more I hear about them, to me, they always seem kind of, just from the covers and the blurbs on the back, they seem kind of campy and like sort of not what I would be into. But the more I hear about them, it sounds like they can get surprisingly dark and surprisingly brutal and go to some surprising places. And so it making me more interested. And so I figured I'm going to do it. I'm going to start reading her stuff this year. Question 5 is, what is a book series that I revisit for comfort? And for this one, I have to just pick the old expanded universe Star Wars novels. Those were the books that they're now considered the Star Wars Legends books, since Disney sort of acquired the Star Wars rights and sort of rewrote everything. But the expanded universe Legends books, those were the books I started reading on, like the full novels I started reading when I was just a little kid. And those were the books that I would buy, go walk down to my corner bookshop and buy the next one that came out and keep on my headboard. And I would read them over and over and over and over again. And for a long time, it was all I would read. But they are the books that got me into reading and got me into sort of a sci-fi genre. And yes, I focused solely on Star Wars forever, but it gave me that interest in the science fiction stuff. And so I still um, carry those books around with me through my life and all my moves and relationships and houses and places and apartments. I've packed them up and I've kept them with me, and I have the same set of books that I bought when I was, 8 years old to, adult. And so those are what I revisit when I want to comfort read, and I still slowly am reading my way through them again. I didn't focus for a long time on sort of prequel stuff, just because I was sort of like a purist, like classic trilogy guy and everything past that. But I'm starting to slowly read some of the prequel books and the early Republic stuff, and they're all really great. And so that is what I go to for comfort, is the old Star Wars books. Question 6 is, forging ahead, what is a debut novel I read by an author or the first in a series from last year? And when I decided I would do this sort of tag video, I started looking through all the books I read last year, and I wanted to stick to just sort of the physical copies I still own. I did a lot of audiobooks and digital and stuff like that, but I wanted to stick to, for the most that I could, to the physical things. And I realized I didn't read any debut novels by anybody last year. And so started looking at the series I had done. And yeah, I have some pretty high ranking first novels of series that I did last year. Like, I did a tier ranking video not too long ago, and so I have some pretty high up ones picks of, like, Spell for Chameleon, I thought was great, by Pierce Anthony. 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke I started, and those are both some of my favorite books for the year. But I wanted to pick a book that I knew I would finish the whole series of, and or that I did finish the whole series of. And I know I won't read everything in the Magic of Xanth series, the Spell for Chameleon series, because there's so much in there, and I just think I think the magic and pure enjoyment I got out of reading the first one would quickly die if I kept diving into it. So I want to sort of, keep it on that top of the pedestal while I can. And 2001: A Space Odyssey, I know I read the second book for that one, but I don't know. I don't think I'm going to continue reading the series, because I feel like it's just, I hear it's not that great. So I just didn't think I would finish it. So the book I picked for the first of the series was Spin by Robert Charles Wilson. And I did finish the whole series of this last year, of Spin, Axis, and Vortex, and had mixed feelings about the series as a whole. I thought it ended really well, so I was happy with that. But Spin, I really, really loved. It was my favorite out of the three, and I really loved the idea of the hypotheticals that they encase the Earth in this sort of slow membrane, where everyone on the Earth, inside this spin membrane, it's sort of slowed down time for them. So to them, their perception of time remains the same, but everything's been slowed down so that for the rest of the universe, it feels like though only few years pass on the Earth, it's been thousands and thousands and thousands of years for the rest of the universe, and this universe is aging, and the star is growing and dying, and it's this great concept and this great mystery about why these hypothetical aliens did this and what's their purpose and what's their goal for it. And they do a lot of really clever things using the slow membrane, where because to them it's normal time, but it seems like the rest of the universe is in like fast forward. They're able to send these like rockets to Mars that start terraforming the planet. And so a process that would take thousands and thousands of years happens in 6 months or a year on for them, because they've slowed down to the rest. And so they're able to then send colony to Mars to populate. And it ends up like this civilization on Mars is now older than the human civilization on Earth, because they've been outside of this bubble. And a lot of cool ideas like that. And I just felt like the grand scale of everything was just a lot of fun to read, and the technology in it was a lot of fun to read, and the solutions people come up with was a lot of fun to read. So I really did enjoy it. The second book, Axis, was by far my least favorite of them all, because it just felt like such a small story after reading such this grandest thing of spin. And then the third book I was really, really happy with, and it left me satisfied with the answers that are given and where certain characters end up and how things develop. And so I really enjoyed it. I'm going to start looking into more of Robert Charles Wilson's stuff, because I did really appreciate him as a writer. And so that was why I picked. Question 7 is goals. Do I have any specific reading goals or challenges? And as I sort of mentioned before, when I started focusing more on science fiction and really started looking to pick up books by I didn't really know what I was looking for. And so my goal at the time when I started doing this was to read all the Hugo winners. And so I was on sort of that progression of that challenge for quite some time, but I quickly started branching out to all these other authors and all these other writers and books and stuff like that. But I still have this goal of finishing all the Hugo winners, and I'm slowly making my way through that. But that's sort of the background goal. The goal I have this year is I want to finish more of the sequels that I've started. I have this big problem I've realized of I will start a series, I'll read the first book, and I'll love it, and then I'll move on to something else, because, as I said, I was very random with my picks, and I didn't want to I wanted to experience a wide range of authors and stories in a short amount of time, so I didn't want to get bogged down in sort of one set of stories, even though I might have enjoyed it a lot. And so I had this problem. I started so many things that I just never finished the series for. And so this year I want to make a conscious effort to close those gaps and close the loops and finish those series that I've started. And so that would be my goal for this year, is to just fill in all those blanks and try to pick up from where I left off of these great books that I read. And so that's why Fall of Hyperion is why I was picking that, because I need to finish that series. And like The Titan by John Varley was one of my favorite books that I read a couple years ago, and I have the rest of the series, and I just haven't started reading them because I wanted to experience all this other stuff. So that's my goal, to read the Hugo winners sort of in the background and keep pecking away at that. But I want to finish more sequels. Question 8 is breaking walls. Do I have any non-reading specific goals? And I would say sort of the broad goal this year is to sort of grow this YouTube channel of mine and figure out what I'm doing with it. And I'm still just loving the process, and I'm just loving, the outlet for me to just do these rambling videos and talk about what I'm reading. And I'm having a lot of fun doing that and connecting with other people and getting recommendations and sharing recommendations. So my goal is to just try to figure out what my aim is and what I'm and keep plucking away at this sort of YouTube game and see where it takes me. But outside of that, the first thing came to my head is my goal is to learn to ice skate, because we recently put my kids in skating lessons, and they're loving it and they're great at it. And I don't know how to skate. And I feel like that's something I want to do with my kids moving forward. So I realized I need to learn how to skate. So there's just a quick goal for sort of non-reading things. Ice skating, it's big where I am, and I never bothered to learn. So, but that'll be this New Year, New Me tag. As I said, it was sort of the first time I've done anything like this. And so I hope you enjoyed the experience with me. And as I said, I will tag some other creators down below, and no pressure to do anything with it. Or I just thought it was a lot of fun doing this. So I want to try to keep that ball rolling. And I can't wait for this next year and see what I learn and see what I experience and see what happens. So thanks for joining me on this episode, and I'll see you next time.